So welcome to this episode of Locked In. In this episode, I'm going to be doing my full review of the Kinekt Seatpost and stem combo. So if you've been looking to add some comfort into basically almost any bike that you currently own, this video is for you. Please stay tuned and subscribe if you haven't already. This review is going to break down into a few different parts, and I'm going to be doing a joint review for both of these items. So we're going to be talking about the specs of both of these items and the available options as far as sizing that you can get for your individual bike, installation, price, ride quality, and my final thoughts. So let's get into the specs of both of these items, and let's start with the stem. The suspension stem is offered in 3 different sizes, a 90, a 105, and a 120, and are only available in a positive 7 degree, but they do also have a positive 30 degree 90 millimeter stem. This is going to give you a 15 to 20 millimeters of travel. It does have a standard 31/8 clamp, and it does work with your standard 1 1/8 threadless style steer tubes. And they do offer 3 different springs, so you can adjust based on your body weight or rider preference based on the terrain that you're riding. Now let's get on to the seat post. The seat post I tested was the 27.2 millimeter size, but they do offer this in a 30.9 and a 31/6. The lengths are going to vary as short as 330 millimeters and go all the way up to 420 millimeters. And this seat post is going to offer up to 35 millimeters of suspension travel. As far as weight goes for both items, the seat post is going to come at 525 grams all the way up to 566 depending on the length and diameter that you're going to go with. And the stem is going to range from 470 grams all the way up to 530 grams. So let's get on to installation. Now installing both these items and just simply replacing them is going to work just like your standard stem or seat post swaps that you're going to do on any other part. The only difference is they both can be tuned. So let's start with the stem. The stem again has 3 different spring options to fine-tune your riding preference. So for me and my scenario, I ran the largest, stiffest spring for my preference on this stem because I thought it was a little too active with the medium spring that came with it. But again, that's going to be user preference. As you can see, it's pretty easily to activate the stem into that 15 to 20 millimeters range of travel, and I just preferred that coming off of the components I've ridden before, which was the Redshift components. Now, swapping that spring out is pretty easy, and they have a great library of tutorials on how to change springs for both items, so make sure to check out their YouTube. I'll put that in the links below if you want to learn how to do that properly, because this is by no means a tutorial. But it only took me a few minutes to swap the spring out, and I could initially feel the difference going from the medium to the large. Now, as far as the rear seat, it is a little bit more complicated to switch the spring out for that, but the nice thing with this is when you actually order the seat post, you actually get to spec what spring comes in that based on your body weight. And even though they sent me the correct spring weight for my body weight, which is currently about 185 pounds, I felt like it was a little too soft for my preference, and I ended up bumping it up to the stiffer spring that was also included in the kit. So they do actually give you some options to soften or stiffen the seat post that you do receive. It's going to come shipped with the recommended spring in there. So that was a nice feature, but I did end up swapping that out. Again, did have to watch a tutorial on that. It wasn't difficult. It's just I couldn't figure out by just looking at it. You do want to watch that video so you make sure you remove it properly, but that did aid in the firmness of the ride, which we'll be getting into in the ride quality section. So after setting up the stem and the seat post, you are going to have to play around with your seat height a little bit, since the seat post is going to have a little bit of sag. It means that once you put your body weight on there, it's going to drop a little bit. So you need to lift your seat post 2 to 3 millimeters, depending on your preference, above what it was initially set at. So make sure that you double check what you currently are at, and then add in a few millimeters, and you're going to have to play with that over the first few rides. But that's going to lead me into price. Price for the stem itself is going to be $179.95, and the seat post is coming at $249.95. And there are 2 other accessories I want to mention because that's going to go into my final thoughts, is going to be one for the stem and one for the seat post. The stem accessory is going to be called the Stem Performance Damper Kit, which is $16.95, and the seat post is going to have a protective wrap option, which is going to be $15 even. So now let's get into ride quality. Ride quality for both these items, like any suspension setup, is going to take a little bit of fine tuning. So if you've come from a traditional rigid setup, it's going to feel like you're riding on a cloud, and it's going to be really, really soft, and it could be almost off-putting at first, but you are going to get used to it. I've ridden a lot of other suspension systems, so I kind of know what I like and have learned to like over the time period of testing these units as well as others, and how I like my bike to feel underneath me, underneath my hands, and underneath my seat. So as far as the stem goes, ride quality, because of the design of the stem, it is acting in a parallel motion, meaning unlike other systems that pivot up and down, this actually drops the handlebars directly vertically up and down, which is a lot more natural feeling compared to other systems that I've tested. But I highly, highly recommend, if you're going to take this on any type of gravel riding, you need to order the performance damper kit. That was a game changer. Even with the largest spring, I thought it was still too soft for my liking, and I felt like I would bottom out that stem really easy on some seemingly easy terrain. So 1000%, if you are riding this on gravel or any kind of difficult terrain that's not just city riding and you're riding this for comfort, you definitely want to add that. That was night and day the best upgrade for this stem to make it more usable on trail that it ended up taking it on. So I rode this setup on street, paved, smooth roads, as well as on mild gravel, and even took it on a really difficult descent on my Poseidon Redwood, which is my flat bar gravel converted mountain bike. And I didn't want to take it on the trail until I put that performance damper in. I felt how it felt, and I was then more confident that I wasn't going to bottom that thing out the entire way down. So it does aid in comfort on your wrist. No matter what, this system does work. But I still felt that even with the damper, I could still bottom that thing out. And at 185 pounds, not the heaviest rider, as well as I like to think that my body weight and body position is pretty well set on the bike to where I'm pretty in the middle as far as my body position goes, to where I'm not really heavy-handed, because then my wrist would hurt or my palms would hurt. So I still think they should go a little bit higher, or have a comfort set of springs or setup, and a performance set of spring and damper combo. I don't have any footage of me putting the damper in. It's really, really easy, and again, they have more tutorials on how to do that, but I definitely would recommend getting that no matter what. As far as the seat post goes, it was very comfortable and very, very different than the Redshift anti-shock seat post that I've ridden before. Now, I'm not doing a comparison between this setup and the Redshift Sports setup. If you want to see that comparison, comment below and I'll work on making that later down the line, because this will turn into a 45-minute video if that happens. So as far as the seat post goes, it is a lot more active feeling, and it does feel like it moves a lot more. So you're always kind of in motion, which took a little while for me to get used to and really dial in the setup, and why I went from the recommended spring to the stiffer spring. With the medium spring, I felt like I was always kind of bouncing when I would be at a, let's say, 85 to 95 cadence on my bike, and once I stepped it up to the stiffer spring, that kind of tended to mellow out quite a bit. Now, I really like how progressive this seat is, so when I took big hits, it really kind of felt like you were flowing in and out of the up and down on the seat rail, but you always felt like you were always active, meaning that on the flats or where you wanted to kind of put the power down, you did feel like you were losing a little bit of power in that seat post, but it felt very natural when you were descending on it, especially when I took it out on the trails that I had mentioned before. So the ride quality and that 35 millimeters of travel, you do use, and you can use all of it. But again, same kind of thing that I mentioned with the stem, me at my body weight on a stiffer setup, and it's still feeling like I never bottomed it out, but I was definitely pushing, I think, the boundaries of it on the terrain that I was riding it on, which I don't know if they recommend, mountain trails, and this is by no means the most technical, but for somebody riding a hardtail or a gravel bike that is looking at this unit, I think that this kind of trail that you're watching here is going to be something that most people are going to want to take it on regardless. So keep that in mind if you are above, let's say, I'd say about 220 pounds. So I think that, again, with the seat post, they should offer a performance level, meaning that if you're a lighter rider but you're riding on more progressive terrain, maybe they ship you, 1 or 2 levels higher of their recommended weight spring for the seat post. But that leads me into my final thoughts. These, and I know before the comments get going, suspensions, stems, and seat posts on gravel bikes, people have mixed opinions on, but I honestly really like it. And there's going to be some pros and cons to this setup, and I'm going to get into both of those right now. So let's start off with the pros. The pros are, for the stem, I like how it works. It feels almost like if you've ridden a Specialized Future Shock, because that runs, vertically, that's kind of how this feels. So it feels very natural, and I like that. With the seat post, again, it's a very fluid motion. Because it's a spring system, there's not that real kind of tight start to it. And unlike an elastomer, which really only takes out the big hits and just kind of barely takes the edge off, this really does hide a lot of the bigger hits and makes it smooth it out so you don't feel like you're getting bucked off. But that's going to lead me into the cons of this system. One, I have to say, aesthetically, I don't like how they both look. They're both very functional, but aesthetically, these are not really to my taste. Some people might not care, but they are very big, they are very heavy, and that's going to lead me to the other con. They are a lot heavier system than other systems on the market, as well as just over obviously your rigid setup that currently is on your bike. So you are going to be adding quite a bit of weight and a lot of complexity, again, with the spring tuning and all that. Most good suspension systems are going to need some kind of tuning based on your weight, but these having to basically take the stem or seat post kind of apart is going to be something that some riders may not want to do. But again, that's going to be worth it in the end if you're really looking for optimal comfort. So if you're somebody who is looking to add comfort into your commuter, especially if you have bad streets or anything like that, I think this would be a decent setup because, again, of how natural it feels in the front end and how kind of floaty it is to where you don't have that hard impact to initiate the seat post. You're just kind of always flowing, which again, some people may like, some people may not. So this is something that's really going to be up to you on whether or not this system fits well with you. The amount of travel that they're offering, there are other products on the market that do offer that, but the level of adjustment into the system is a pro and a con, I think, realistically. As well as I would definitely recommend to get the cover for the seat post if you are going to be running it on gravel. I did take it on a gravel ride and a little pebble got in there and I sounded like I almost like munched something in the seat post, but it just kind of got in, made a lot of noise, and then kind of shot itself out. But I initially freaked out and thought I ruined it or something broke. So if you are going to be taking it on dusty or dirty terrain, definitely get that cover so that you don't have the same issue that I did. So if you have any questions about this system, please put in the comments below, or let me know if you are currently riding them and what you think about them. I check my comments every single day. And lastly, please make sure to turn notifications on so you can see more reviews and more cycling content on this channel. I post multiple times a week, as well as you can follow me on Facebook and Instagram. Links for that, as well as my Spreadshirt and Pateron, are in the links below, where I do offer one-on-one cycling consultations every single month for my top 2 tier levels. And lastly, thanks for watching this episode of Locked In.
Let's get locked in.